that performance. So I want to go ahead and give a quick introduction. I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Roberts for coming out from Oklahoma and for doing this wonderful performance that you just seen, which is to be a rare occasion if you've never been to a powwow before. It's a great time. I recommend it. And so I just want to say, before we head off into this, can you give another round of applause? I also just want to thank each of you for coming out to this event as well. It's really where you get to experience an event like this, which we're doing in honor of Native American Heritage Month. So, the few things we're going to lead off into after just having a powwow is we're going to go ahead and do a few quick questions, which later on we'll let the audience participate to, and the Q&A. Before that, though, I want to say, did you want to do the land acknowledgement? Okay.
Halito. Saho chifot ronse hishetat anato chatach kashasiat. What I did was I introduced myself in my language, which is the Choctaw language. And what I said was my Indian name is Dancing Eagle Feathers, and I come from the Choctaw and Chickasaw people. Now, Dancing Eagle Feathers, that is the name that I prefer, but that is not the name that I go by every day. My English name is Michael Roberts. Now, how did I come to get that name? Well, our people originally were from what is now Mississippi. And when we were moved across on the Trail of Tears, when we got to Oklahoma, or the Indian Territory, they couldn't pronounce our names, let alone spell those names. So they took those names away from us and gave us names that was recognizable and easily remembered. At that time, the name for our family was given Roberts, and when I was born, it was only right and customary in the American way to give me the English name of Michael. So that is the reason why I have that name now. We as Native Americans now, we're going back into giving those names to our grandchildren and our children, where those names have meanings, those names have purpose, those names were passed down from a long, long, long time ago. Now, as for the land acknowledgement, we all know that all of America, and when we say we as indigenous people, we say from Alaska all the way down into South America, those are our people. We are the original inhabitants of here. We as Native Americans, when you're saying America or the United States, we don't recognize the border that crosses up into Canada or the border that is south of us. We see those people as the same as us. We all have our own customs, our own language, our own songs and dances. The people that lived here where we are at right now were the Caddo people, the Kiowa, the Comanche people. And we just want to acknowledge them. You know, my wife and I, this is my wife, Rebecca Roberts, and she was going to talk a little bit earlier, or a little bit later. But we had the opportunity last year to travel to Australia. Her and I, we do a lot of tours overseas. And what was really cool is that when we were landing in Australia, the very first thing that they said was, we would like to recognize the First Nations people of Australia. And I was like, wow, that is something awesome. Now, for us, you know, I remember looking back not even 10 years ago where there was a lot of turmoil that was going on with the indigenous people of Australia and the government. And it was something really nice. So what you guys are doing here today, acknowledging the first inhabitants of this area, I think that's something that needs to be done.
Something very, something we need to more recognize. It's not really spoke about. So thank you for sharing a piece of that knowledge with us today. So to go ahead and lead into the questions that we have for the panelists today, I want to go ahead and start off with the first one. And it says, can you each of you explain what area your tribe is from?
Roberts, and I am full blood from Taos, New Mexico, which is northern New Mexico. I'm Pueblo. And in New Mexico, we have 19 different pueblos. We all have our own languages, our own culture, ceremonies, songs, and dance. However, there are several of the pueblos that we do share the same language or same dialect of language. However, some of those languages are spoken faster, or some of those languages are spoken slower. So I visited one of those other pueblos, and it was the Isleta Pueblo, which is just south of Albuquerque. And their language, I could not understand. I tried to pick up, I sat there and I listened. And I picked up a few words here and there, but most of it I didn't understand. It was their tongue was faster. So I picked up maybe out of the whole conversation, maybe 4 words. So yeah, our language is very important to us, to our people, to any Native community. Our language is very important. So that is where my people are from, is northern New Mexico. We're the furthest pueblo in New Mexico. And I'll turn it over to Angelo.
Yeah, cloga dana toda chini lishne. Tabahan bushes chin, but tutney dasha che, tut chini dasha nella. Red mesa dasha kun. Hello, everyone. My name is Angelo Bigay, and I come to you guys from the Navajo Nation from Arizona. If you were to look on the map, or if some of you guys know where the Four Corners is, that's where I'm from. About 10 miles west from the Four Corners, going towards Phoenix, I guess. But I come to you guys from the Navajo Nation people, and the style I'm dressed as today is the men's prairie chicken dance. And these styles of dances don't just come from one area. They are adopted by many different tribes. And if you were to go to a different powwow or other conferences, you'll see similar people dressed up just the way we are. And they all have their own stories and their own experiences they went through in life. And thank you. Let's turn it over to Mike.
Hello, everybody. My name is Pamela Roberts from Choctaw, Chickasaw, and Taos Pueblo. Thank you.
Yes, this is our daughter. I don't know if you understood her. She spoke very quickly, but her name is Punpai Roberts, and that is going back to what I referred to earlier. We're starting to give our children their names, their Indian names. Punpai actually means red snow in my wife's language. Now, where that name red snow came from, that's up for debate. Now, you could say red snow comes from the wars with the blood on the snow, or the way that I see it, where my wife is from, the mountains, when the sun is setting and there's snow on the mountains, you can see the snow looks like it's red, So that I kind of think that might be where that's from, So
Thank you so much. The next question, can each of you share something that your tribe is known for, or any tribes in general, that non-Native Americans might not be aware of?
My people are I think that something that my people are famously known for, but not maybe publicly known for, are our round dance songs. A lot of the Oklahoma tribes, like the Comanches, the Kiowas, the Pawnees, the Poncas, they sing a lot of our round dance songs. And I'm thankful for it, living in Oklahoma, because any celebration in Oklahoma, round dance songs or round dancing is started off at any celebration. So it takes me back home. It's something that I cherish, being away from home. But our round dance songs are something that that we are known for, that other tribes have borrowed or have been given to share in their communities. So that's something that that I'm really I'm thankful and I'm proud of, is our round dance songs being shared in Oklahoma, where I live.
People we're very well known for their silversmith and their arts and craft. You know, my grandparents go and travel all over the world, and they are vendors. You know, they sell their own arts and crafts. My grandpa is a ranch man, and he's a farmer. You know, he farms all his own food, all his own vegetables, and he raises his own cattle. And at the same time, you know, he's a silversmith, and he also, you know, makes teepees. And we're also a big part of the Native American church, I guess you can say. That's the my grandpa makes teepees, and they use these teepees in the ceremonies. And whenever I see these teepees as I travel all over the world, I see a teepee, and you know, it recognizes his work, and I can tell that's his work. And that's something I want to share with you guys. Thank you.
So I'd like to add a little bit to what they had to say, because I'm not from the area where my wife is from, and of course not where my son-in-law is from. So my wife's tribe, their pueblo is actually very famous. That's the only place, I would say, in the world, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but the pueblo is actually stacked on top of one another. The homes are stacked on top of one another. And I also have to say that their people there are very, very strong in their customs. Very, very strong. And the same with my son-in-law as well. They're very, very strong in their customs. They're very, very strong in their language as well. Now, for my people, and for a lot of other tribes out there, it is kind of a long answer, but we're here to learn, right? All of these things, these dances that you've seen earlier, and the songs that we sing, at one time, they were outlawed. And what I mean by outlawed, we could not do these things, especially the tribes in Oklahoma. The only way we would be able to do them is if it was a strict supervision, whether the police were watching us, the government were watching us, or the church were watching us. By doing these things without supervision, we had the risk of going to jail or even being put to death. The reason being is because they felt that if we did these things, we would cause an uprising, cause chaos, go on the war party. And a lot of that stuff, the reason why it was outlawed was because it was a misunderstanding, you know. Now, for my people, the Choctaw people, like I said earlier, you know, our people were the very first people that was on the Trail of Tears. But do we have any Irish people out there? Anybody of Irish descent? No. Wow, that's kind of unusual. Oh, one. Okay. For our Irish relative out there, we do have a very, very close relationship with the Irish. Now, that relationship, how many of you guys have ever heard of the potato famine? Okay, the potato famine, it was a time in Ireland when they went through hard times. It wasn't that all the crops were bad. It was only certain individuals were allowed to eat those crops. With that being the case, there was a lot of people that died from starvation. Now, while that was going on, our Choctaw people were moved into Oklahoma 10 years earlier. We were still going through hard times trying to adjust to this new place. But because we were the very first people that was put on the Trail of Tears, we were given things that other tribes weren't. One of the things was cattle. However, the cattle wasn't the best of the cattle, you know. There was a lot of it was sickly, a lot of it we couldn't use. Guns, rifles, they were, most of the time, were unusable. Blankets, and then also money. Now, we had no use for money. There was no Walmart down the street or anything like that. But during that time, there were treaties that were being signed. And then also during this time, there were rations that were being passed out to the Choctaw people from the government. Well, one of these times when these rations were being passed out, there were some Quakers that came to this distribution site, and they told the Choctaw people at that time about what was going on in Ireland. Well, the Choctaw people, they knew that suffering because, like I said, we just went through that. It was a unanimous decision that all of the tribe would round up the money that was remaining and send it to Ireland to help the people there. That story there, not very many people know about that in the United States. I did shows in Boston where there's a huge Irish, community there. They didn't even know that story. But if you go to Ireland, the people in Ireland, they teach that in their history books, all the way to the little kids. They all know that story. That was 170, well, it'll be 176 years ago that happened now. Which is, like I was saying, that the relationship is still good. So during the time of COVID, the Irish people, they felt the need to help our Choctaw people out, So they rounded up, and it was something that it was individual Irish people did. It wasn't that it was a huge, thing that the government tried to do. Individual Irish people rounded up money, and it was something like $20 million. And they sent it to the Choctaw Nation to help us out during COVID. Well, our Choctaw people, if anybody knows, about our Choctaw people are very well established now. And our Choctaw people said, we're okay. We're okay. Our people are safe, However, there's tribes that are further west of us that aren't as well off. So the Choctaw people matched that donation and sent it to the Navajo people and the Hopi people. That was something that was great. Nobody knows that. It wasn't in any news articles, news, things like that. But another step further, what the Irish people did, because it wasn't only the Choctaw people that did that donation. The Quakers actually contacted the people, the First Nations people of Canada, east of the St. Lawrence River, which would be the Iroquois people or the Six Nations people. The Six Nations people did the same thing. They contributed to that time of need for the Irish people. Well, last year during the Lacrosse World Cup, Ireland was sitting in third place in the world. They willingly, without hesitation, gave up that third place setting to the Six Nations people of Iroquois. Gave it to them to go and compete in the World Cup. I thought that was so dang awesome, When you think about the world as a whole, there's so much turmoil that's going on, hatred, misunderstanding, killing, and all of these things. But it's just those simple things, acts of kindness, that could change this whole thing around. That's one thing that we try to do as a dance group when we go out. My wife and I, we're getting ready to go to South Africa in a couple of weeks, and it's to bridge these gaps that we have, the misunderstanding of our people, and trying to make relationships with other people from around the world, So that's something I wanted to share.
Thank you for sharing that enriching history. I didn't even know that either, and so it's good to know that too. I'm learning here as well, so I appreciate it. For the next question, what would you say is like a favorite tradition from each of your tribes, or that your tribe still hold on to this very day, and explain why or the history behind it?
Where do you want to go? You want to start? Well, I guess I'm...
As Michael mentioned, we have a lot of our ceremonies and a lot of our traditions still to this day that have gone back thousands of years. So my people celebrate everything. We celebrate the new year. We celebrate the fall equinox, the changing of spring, going into winter. We celebrate everything, So we have these celebrations throughout the year. And any one of those celebrations is my favorite because I live in Oklahoma. And my daughters, we've got 3 daughters, 2 grandsons, and we try to make it back often for these celebrations to take part and, to carry on these ways of life, for our people. My tribe is probably maybe about 2,500. Our blood quantum is, they require us to be a quarter to be enrolled. And there's full bloods, but not very many left. Both my parents are full blood. So I'm full blood. My girls are half. And then my grandsons are a quarter. So unless they would marry back into the tribe, then that would make their kids' blood stronger. So, but yeah, any one of those celebrations that we have throughout the year, it's, any of them are my favorite. Like I said, we celebrate anywhere from January 1st with, they call the turtle dance, where the men dance and they sing and dance at the same time. And that's for our people to have a prosperous new year, for our people to be in good standing, for good health, for good well-being, to carry us through the year. And then coming up soon will be our quiet season, where it is just what it's called, quiet season. We don't honk horns, we don't yell around outside. You can chop wood, but like no chainsaws or anything that's really loud, because that's when I guess going into winter, a lot of the animals go into hibernation. They go into kind of a sleep mode, I guess. So we're being grateful for that, that time of quietness. And so that time of quietness is for about a month or so. And then come January, we come out of that quiet season. We go to the river and we bathe in the cold river. So that breaks our quiet season and then starts the new year again. So yeah, there's a lot of celebration ceremonies and traditions that we still take part in that are my favorite, and like I said, I try to include my daughters, try to, let them be aware of these things that we still live there in Taos at the Pueblo. Thank you.
All right, something I want to share with you guys is what we still do today is the shoe game. And, they only do the shoe games during the winter time. So they're about to start up this month coming up. I had my family come in to visit me from Arizona, and they were talking about, being excited to go back home to play shoe game. And a shoe game is a game. There's two teams, one team on one side and another team on the other, and they compete against one another. So on one side they have 4 shoes, and on the other side they also have 4 shoes, and they hide a ball, and they have a stick similar to what I have here, and a player would go to the other side and try to find the ball, but he would only have one chance or one hit to decide where it was. And that's how that game was played all night. And during the winter season, I remember going over to my grandparents' house or to my uncle's house or to my grandma's house, just to have fun, just to participate in these shoe games. And what it brought was laughter. And, everyone got to visit with everyone. Everyone got to have a good time. And at the same time, you were gambling, you're trying to win the game and win money at the same time. And as you can see, the game's evolved to this day as you see all these casinos around, and that's kind of similar to what the games were back then. And the story behind that shoe game was, long ago there was animals, the day animals and the night animals. So on one side we have, the rabbits and the deers and the eagles, the cows, the horses, and the other side you had the night animals, the coyotes, the fox, the owls, and so on. And they couldn't decide, which day was better. I guess which time of the day was better, either the nighttime or the daytime. So the way they tried to figure that out was to play a game and decide. So they were playing that game during the nighttime, and during the end of the game, the day team was about to win, but I think it was a beaver. A beaver snuck under the sand, and he cheated, and he figured out where the ball was. So that's how the nighttime team ended up winning. But they talked it over, and someone seen what had happened, so they decided we're gonna go 50-50. We're gonna have nighttime during this time. We're going to have daytime during this time. So that's how that game came to be, and that's how that game is played still to this day. So yeah, thank you for listening.
I would have to say everything that we do, everything that we do is something similar that we used to do a long time ago, gathering. When we're here demonstrating powwow dance. Okay, one of the questions that's going to come up is, what is powwow? Well, a powwow, very simply, is a gathering of people, just like what we're doing here. During that powwow, we celebrate life, harmony, kinship, prosperity. We share in stories, we share in songs, we eat together, all of these things. But something that is very sacred to our people and still takes part nowadays is a right to choose relatives. Taking a relative, that is something that is very, very sacred in our traditional ways, and not only Choctaw people, that's across the board. To call somebody brother or sister, that is something that was very, very sacred. Now, back in the 70s, they used to say blood brother, where they cut their hand. That never happened, What would happen is you would exchange gifts, by exchanging gifts and saying in front of the people. And then they would also dress that individual. So if I was taking somebody into our Choctaw tribe, I would dress them in our Choctaw traditional dress. I would tell the people, this is now my brother. We would maybe smoke the pipe together. Now, in our pipes, there was no weed or anything like that. It was tobacco, something that is very sacred to our people as well. That tobacco, they say that is the way that we talk to the Creator. This here, like what we're doing now, this is a pastime that's gone on from generation to generation. Telling the stories about like that shoe game as well. We still do that. When our girls were young, we'd sit around and we'd tell stories about why things are. We as Native American people, we feel that everything has a spirit. Everything that the Creator made has a spirit. The trees, the birds, the water, the wind, everything, How those things came to be, there's a story behind those things. Just like that game and the difference between night and day, like my son-in-law told me. All of those things, that is one thing that we still do and that we cherish.
Thanks for explaining about the powwow. I love gatherings too. So I want to switch things up and skip a few questions right quick, but go due to time. So I want to ask, what would you say is a few current issues that the Native American culture encountered during this day and time, and especially on the Indian reservation, that we might not be aware about?
Well, if you guys aren't aware, if there's anybody from Oklahoma, within the past couple of weeks, the tribal tag issue, Oklahoma, a lot of the tribes, they don't have compacts with the state. We are sovereign nations. Sovereign nations, we have our own governments. By doing that, they were able to put their own tags out to their people, saving them money by taxes. Well, our governor in Oklahoma decided to start kind of a little, I don't want to say war, but, a conflict with the tribes now. So driving off reservation or your territory, the highway patrol or the local police departments, they can and will stop you, give you a ticket, and they can seize your vehicle. Those are the things that are going on, and that's only been going on the last week. So all of these things aren't in the past; they're going on right now. With the state of Oklahoma, there's been other issues with gaming compacts. A lot of people, they don't understand about casinos. Just same thing what my son-in-law just mentioned. We as Native American people, we've always been gambling people. We've always had those games of chance. That, just like everything else, we've evolved just like everyone else. That gaming revenue that helps our people through education, through healthcare, helping our seniors, helping our special needs children. That's what that money goes to.
Thank you for explaining that. So how would you describe the Native American culture in the 20th century?
Depending on where, what tribe you're talking about. You know, like I said with that first story, you know, the difference between Navajo and Hopi, Choctaw people, you know. Depending on, because there's 500, I believe there's 576 tribes in the United States. And like I said, we're all sovereign, you know. So depending how that government is set up, their tribe could be very, very healthy, like the Choctaw people, or they could be third world. Third world would be like some of the tribes in South Dakota, some of the tribes in Nebraska, where you go there and you would never believe that you're in the United States because there's no running water, there's no electricity. Their homes sometimes don't even have adequate doors or windows. You know, those things still exist here, you know. I have a brother that lives up in Montana, and where he lives, that's a third world country. You know, it's you would never believe that you're in the United States living there.
So as individuals that might not be aware of like the Native American culture, but would like to get more information and stay in the know as to what's going on, how can we help out? What are some resources you could recommend for individuals to get connected or get plugged in?
Individuals can contact the state tribal agencies, like tribal offices, will give information as far as enrollment, tribal statuses, stuff like that. I would suggest contacting like the tribal office, and from there they would direct you to different departments of where you can get assistance or whatever it is that you're looking for. Probably a tribal office would be the best place to start, and then from there kind of just weave your way down down the line as to what exactly you're looking for.
Also, Facebook, TikTok is a great place as well. You know, whenever the Dakota Access Pipeline was going on, Facebook actually helped a lot of the things that were going on be out. If you guys aren't aware of what was going on then, that was pretty much a war that was going on between the tribes, and I'm talking war, you know, that was going on between the tribes in the United States, you know. And for us that were way down here in Oklahoma and in Texas, if we didn't have Facebook, we would have never heard the things that were going on. So those are two great points, great access points as well.
Thank goodness for internet. So I want to say, so when it comes to the Native American culture, we know like sometimes like one with nature, and so, but how does Native American culture like view higher education?
Well, this here is our daughter, Tiara. She is a Gates Millennium Scholar. Now, Gates Millennium Scholar, I don't know if there's some out here, but she's going for her doctoral program at Baylor University. She started off at OU, went to ASU, and now at Baylor. You know, so she's got about a year and a half to go. So right there, you know, that tells you our people. We see it like a long time ago, you know, going to war, being a warrior, picking up a weapon and defending your people. That was the way to be. Nowadays, you have to have that book smart. You know, like how we taught them, you know, it was like you have to use their own weapons against them, you know, use that mind. So the education part is a very, very big thing for our people.
And I also think that if Native students are assisted early on, like ninth grade, if they're supported and if they're given direction early on, they can be very successful. You know, with resources, with getting the help they need, because I mean, like for my husband, I graduated in 1989. I didn't have that resource. We had a JOM program, Johnson O'Malley program. We had that, but it wasn't, you know, we just didn't have a lot of access to things. But now, you know, there are so many opportunities for our Native students that are there. So, you know, just I think just having that direction, having that encouragement, having that drive to want to do better for your people, for your tribe. That's what makes Native students successful. And probably within the past 10 years, I would say, I've never seen so many doctoral students in the Native community. It's mind-blowing, and it's awesome to see all these doctoral students at graduation time. So yeah, it's just knowing that there are resources for our Native students to be successful. That's something that's really important for our Native kids.
Thank you for sharing that. I feel like that deserves applause, though, within itself. I don't know about anybody else, but, sharing what was done in the past and now seeing that now getting the education that they need and just to bring that back to the tribe and just, like you said, education, learn and grow. And so I just want to share that because you never know what, on the back end, what they have to go through to get to that. So thank you for sharing that. I want to go ahead and open it up to the crowd for a Q&A. If there's anybody in the crowd that does have a question, I ask for you to please stand up and just share your question with us. We won't be able to pass a mic due to the space, but if you have a question, just please stand up and share your question with everybody.
That's kind of a difficult question because the things that we do every day, we've never lived like the non-native life, so we really don't know what happens out there, We give thanks every day. I'm sure everybody does that, and we gather every day as a family. I don't really think there's really very much difference between us or anybody else out there in the world. Like we do those same things. Like we appreciate the gifts that the Creator gave us. We appreciate family. So I think the only thing would be different is us dressing like this and dancing. Gathering together at a powwow. This is something that we do every weekend. If you see us out on the street, of course, we're not dressed like this, but this is where we're most comfortable. Now, if I was dressed in non-native clothing and I was sitting here like this, I wouldn't be able to carry on this conversation. I would feel completely different. I'd feel out of place. But being dressed like this gives me that confidence. It gives me that this is who I am. So other than that, I don't think there's very much difference.
I guess since, maybe like a lot of people are not aware of Indigenous First Nations peoples, it's become really big the past few years, like celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day. Now within the Native communities, they have like Rock Your Moccasins Day. They have Ribbon Skirt Day. They have different things where First Nations people, Native peoples will wear these items, and a lot of our Native communities wear these items every day. My people, for instance, when our grandma or when our moms or when our grandmas would get to a certain age, they're not going to wear jeans anymore. They're not going to wear work clothes anymore. My mom is 75 and she's changed over to wearing skirts or dresses every day. Of course, she can't wear moccasins just because of like the terrain and the weather. It just depends, but some of our people still wear these clothes every day, dresses, moccasins. There are ceremonies where those kind of clothes have to be worn all the time. So like for some people, it's a day of celebration for some, it's a way of life, you know. It's like you know, that's just how it is, you know. And I'm proud to say that my people wear some of these things all the time. You know, it's just not that one certain day. Yeah.
I've got to add to that because I'm sitting here talking. I started thinking about this. Okay, so we have going to someone's house and visiting them and becoming that relation. You know, my wife and I, we were up in Grand Rapids, Canada this past summer, which is about 8.5 hours north of the Canadian border, straight north of Winnipeg. Well, we met this family up there this past summer, talked to them maybe once or twice, and we invited them down to Oklahoma. Well, they showed up about 3 weeks ago, and they've been, part of family now. I mean, they really have become family, So maybe that might be a little different, and it would be no problem for us as well, if we were to get invited to somebody's home and come and visit with them and stay with them and become family. Now, when we say family, when they came into our house, of course, it's respectful to say, do what you need to do. Whatever is ours is yours. I don't know if that happens really in non-Native communities, but in Native communities, when we say it, we mean it. So, hey, if you're hungry, you go eat, like whatever's in there is yours, If you want to cook, go eat. And I think that might be a little different, But that still goes on, I think they're planning on heading to southern Texas this coming weekend, So, but it's been great having them around. So.
Thank you for sharing. So we have time for one more question, and I believe the lady in the back had her hand raised.
Right. That's actually my younger brother that lives up in Montana on Fort Peck Indian Reservation. And that community there, there's a lot of, let me ask you this. How many people in here has witnessed a murder, has found a dead body, has had somebody in your family very closely die or be killed or raped or has gone missing? 1 or 2 times in your family, 3 or 4 times, to where it makes it to where it doesn't even affect you anymore. That's what I'm talking third world country, In the community that my little brother lives, it's very, very common for somebody to commit suicide. It's very, very common for somebody to be murdered. It's very, very common for a young girl to become missing. It's very, very common for each and every individual in here, if we live there, to be molested as a child. That's what I'm talking about, Now, why is it that way? There's a couple of reasons why. Number one, the resources aren't there. That community, there's the Highway 2 that goes through there. A lot of oil workers, oil pipeline workers that go through there. A lot of times with the oil pipeline workers, they're not the best of people. They're a lot of times that's kind of like the last resort. Now, I'm not saying everybody, but a lot of times like there's a lot of felons that get put on those lines, because there's not a strenuous background check, but also there's alcohol abuse, drug abuse, things like that. Different reasons why, One reason, alcohol is there because it's an economic boost for the community. You have all those oil workers that are going through there, they like to drink. By doing that, it also opens the door up for our Native community as well to drink. By doing that, that adds on to other problems, other issues and stuff like that. It's a wasteland, we weren't put on when we were put in the reservations, we weren't put in the very best places, Some of us lucked out, How many of you guys have seen The Killers of the Flower Moon come out? It's out now. they lucked out. It's kind of like one of those things, blessings in the sky, in disguise. They discovered oil there, and that was the same thing with some of our other tribes. They were fortunate to have resources there that ended up the federal government needed. But those other communities, they're wastelands. There's nothing there. Then it leads to those problems, and those problems are still there today.
Can we just give one more hand of applause? Just want to say thank you guys for coming out. I don't know about anybody else, but I learned a lot today, and right from the source, so I really appreciate that. So the next thing we're going to have is, you heard a lot about powwows. You probably never thought you'd be able to have a chance to get in one or to learn one, but now we're about to learn how to participate in a powwow. So if you want to participate, you can go ahead and head over to the circle area. Oh, we'll get to participate in the powwow right quick.
All right, now, so before we go any further, I do want to say that we love doing this. We love sharing, that this community, and we don't care what race you are, what color you are. We love sharing. Like I said earlier, about the Trail of Tears and things like that. We went through hard times. Those tribes that are going through hard times, they have these powwows as well, where the people gather. And at these powwows, you would never think that you were in a place that there was so much turmoil, because they gather and you see them, they're happy. It gives them that opportunity to release. These powwows, I wouldn't say they're to say they're spiritual is something a little bit different, okay? But there is spirituality there, because there's that gathering of people. That's that releasing of, like the negativity and all of those things. It's a way of life. So we're going to come over here and we're going to do a dance demonstration. We're going to invite you guys to come out and dance. All of these dancings, all of these things that you see here, they have meaning, they have purpose, from the tops of our heads all the way down to our moccasins. Every single article has a meaning, has purpose. Now, this isn't something that we used to wear a long, long time ago. It's evolved, and we're going to be sticking around a little bit later. If you guys have any questions for us, we're going to take pictures as well. But come out and join us. Come out and dance with us. We're very, very happy and thankful that you guys invited us here today. Yakoki, thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Alrighty, if y'all want to learn how to powwow, go ahead and meet them at the circle area. Thank you so much.